want to ask us to try to limit ourselves to 1 minute response. So we and go around the horn if you have something to contribute in light of response to what's happened over the last few minutes. We'll get back to the audience in a little bit. Pick that.
I just want to say this. One of the things that I think has been my skill set.
Take the microphone.
I'm sorry. One of the things that I think has been my skill set is listening. But when I talk, a lot of times I feel like, as my father said, I'm 6'3", you have to stand up and say what needs to be said. But part of the work that we're going to have to do is this healing and reconciliation in our community. And that's going to take a separate vehicle that we need to create maybe among us and make this part of the action item that comes from this. Because I know that young man, and I do understand his anger. But I also understand that we cannot lose the standards of respect, which is what peacemaking is about.
That's right.
It's ethics and integrity that lies within yourself. You can say what you have to say. Be angry, but sin not. You don't stop respecting. And my big thing is elders in partnership. And I've written a letter that we signed at Shape Community Center that talks about our commitment to young people. But the standards we're going to have to do in a separate, to learn it. Yeah.
Investor?
I think there's one thing we can all agree on, that when we talk about education, everybody in here is probably engaged in just about. And everybody has a perspective that's probably right. There are 1,000 or 1,000,000 aspects of different ways you can look at education. There's one constant that we really should focus on that I think provides the axis around which all these other issues kind of intersect, and that's literacy. I want to talk about just a little bit of data that we need to be concerned about, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. We have one proposal. 14% of African Americans by 8th grade, only 14% are proficient in reading. Yes. Can make inferences, predictions, all the different components of abilities. 14%, I dare say that's probably higher than what it is. 14%, I dare say that's probably higher than what it is. Now I was.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh,
go ahead.
So I'm asking myself, as an educator, an activist, and a person who understands the relationship between literacy and our struggle. Why can't our young people read? And I'm asking a person in Baltimore, I said, you know, is there something in the water? And he said, yeah, there is something in the water. In Baltimore, our students, we don't have water fountains in Baltimore. For almost a decade, our physical infrastructure has not allowed our kids to drink out of the water because of lead poisoning. This is in America. We know we hear about Flint. In Houston, maybe we should make sure to hold our leadership accountable and make sure they have a study that assures us that our students, that there's no lead poisoning. I don't know if that study has been done.
It's just beginning out of this.
Okay, great. So I think that's something that we need to talk about. And I want to just, kind of make it very quick and get to the point. Is that when we came out of slavery, not being allowed to read, before the government even got to the South to set up school systems, we had already collectively pooled our resources and began to educate ourselves. Okay? And then we talk about today, we're here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Black Power, but preceding Black Power with the organization SNCC, there was Freedom Summer in 1964. Who in here has participated in that? Did anybody?
I did.
Okay, well and what they were able to do, they were able to register a lot of voters. That was the primary responsibility. But they also set up over 50 freedom schools. Okay, and I think something like that is what we need today in terms of this generation. I want to float that idea out there.
Is that the proposal you were talking about?
That's the proposal.
Freedom schools, and what would be the essence of the mission of the freedom schools?
I think that while we have the country mobilized right now, the young people mobilized around police shootings, Because we can go on, I mean, you know, it didn't come a day soon the person was shot and killed. I mean, that was just a rerun of last summer. So it's becoming almost like a ritual for us to wait on someone to get shot and shooting, and then we respond to it with protest. And I think that we should protest every time there is a shooting. But I think that it's very critical that we need to have a program to go alongside that. So while you have the students and people around this country mobilized, I think something specific that we should be, it's an emergency, because if only 14% of your people, millions of people running, only 14% can read.
A little, yeah.
Then that's a crisis. And that feeds into the criminal justice system. If you can't read by the time you're in the 3rd grade, you are 68 times as likely to be in prison as you are otherwise. Okay, you can go on. I don't want to go with all that data, but the point I'm making is that's something specific that we need to actually, I just want to float that idea that we have a liberation summer. It would take about a year to plan, but next summer there ought to be at least, we start it locally, I don't know what the number might be, it might be 2,000 black students. Stop what you're doing, and you're going to participate and volunteer in the communities and go and get these kids and help teach. Okay, the other thing is I want to say is that we're not going to wait for George Soros. We're not going to wait for the Gates. We're not going to wait for the philanthropists. I mean, that's fine, you can get, but we're going to do this ourselves. Black power.
Thank you. So we got a hard support proposal from PK. Write it down so we get the message right. The same thing, Levesson.
Brother Moderator, there are models for those freedom schools in existence right now, and I can give you that data.
Please.
Let me say one thing, because PK just gave me that example. I want to say that the Children's Defense Fund, they've already provided the model for this.
That's one
so
model.
It's not like, I'm not saying that this is not being done.
No,
I think it's, we're right here to shape communities.
No,
I don't want to say it's not.
Just got to make up our mind to do it. Okay,
brothers and sisters, I want to repeat an adage that I grew up with. You cannot fall out the bed if you're sleeping on the floor. The second thing I want to say is biblical. And it says that surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. What I'm suggesting, brothers and sisters, that it is systemic. If a kid's nose is running, it's not his nose that's sick. It's something wrong with the system, and it's manifested through the nose leaking. So my point is that there are mouths out here like the Children's Defense Fund mouth. You can go to www.mbkhouston.org and you're going to see a series of action points that run from literacy to college readiness to post-secondary occupations and skills to re-entry, employment, etc. All of these action points, and they're action points for reform of the police system that came from the 21st century Commission on Policing. So my point is that working unity is better than talking unity. So what we've got to do is that we've got to coalesce around some practical kinds of programs that are already out there. Now, you might have something very, very new.
Talked about, and we were driven to give solutions in these presentations. And so I presented in 4 areas solutions, if we have a chance to get to them, but I'm going to force the education solution on you. The solutions available to us are still 3 basic levels of education, because we always go back to education as the conduit and solution to most of our economic and systemic problems, or lack thereof. College and university-based professional degree careers and workforce education and skills training are the 3 basic areas. Notice that 2 of them are degree-driven tracks. That is because 3/5 of the new jobs have degree or advanced degree requirements. Check the records. Data-driven. It's projected that 75% of the next generation of jobs will require a degree or skills training, at least a 2-year degree. That leaves the person with a high school diploma or less competing for 25% of the new jobs. But remember, there's 75% of the population who needs a job. Put those numbers together. They're going to be competing, 75% are going to be competing for 25% of the jobs. Further, that portends that 78% of the HISD graduates will ultimately not have a degree, nor likely any marketable skills in the current workforce environment. Finally, to compare the 78% who don't have degree or skills training to that 75% of the job requirements, it's a meltdown that must be averted. At least the training deficit in the pipeline should be plugged. How can we solve this hemorrhage of human capital? Solution. Instead of warehousing students for 4 years because of state-mandated and financially induced crack subsidies from the state education finance formula, HISD should opt out of state funding and do absolute local funding, because we have the richest real estate in Texas. That may not be doable, but it is a long-term objective. Immediate objective is the solution. Instead, we should revert to workforce education in the 9th and 12th grades and reverse the 30-year educational public policy trend that took skills training out of schools and fueled the pipeline to prison. The new slavery brought to you by PIC, the prison industrial complex. We must address the workforce issues. We must create workforce-based education in our high schools. And finally, when we do that, we'll find that our students are much more prepared and less ill-equipped with a high school diploma to go into the workforce. And it will save them from the television commercials promising certificates and training that is useless, and end up with student loans that destroy their credit. Trades in schools, ladies and gentlemen.
There's something a little unique about the way we designed this program. You'll note that there are no elected officials on the program. We need to find a way to engage with our black elected officials, because apparently whatever we're doing clearly is not working.
That's right. That's right.
One of the things that we know now, and I was a black elected official, is that they are automatically, by elevation to elected office, connected to the money class. So while we might not know some of our wealthier cousins, they do. They get donations from them for their campaigns. They engage with them about facilitating contracts. But the kind of elected officials, and it's critical pretty much of them all, they don't remind me of the Mickey Leaders of the world. They don't even remind me of the Barbara Jordans of the world. And I am disturbed because when I hear about things that are going on in the public school system, like HISD, I hear them from the Vesta, I hear them from Charles. I don't hear them from the school board members that we got elected on the school board. They may be doing something, I just don't know what it is. I just don't know what it is. We need to have a way to have an accountability system for elected officials. It doesn't mean we don't like it. It doesn't mean it's a personal deal, but we need to have, we need to have a way to engage with them beyond what we got now. Cleveland has said for years that we need to have a black agenda. I support that. But I remember, as a founding member of the National Black United Front, we've gathered from all over the country every year and resolved to have African-centered education in every public school system, and resolved to end police brutality, and resolved. And we after a few years, we got this long list of resolutions, we ain't accomplished none of it. Let's stop that. Let's stop giving a lot. So I'm not saying that would be the same with the black agenda, but the question is, how do we systematically, collectively, do an analysis, understand our self-interest, make sure it's not a third ward south side agenda, but a north, south, east, west, suburban, urban agenda that we, in a disciplined way, go through the hard work of developing and then ratifying. Because it should not be a black agenda composed by the 10 of us. It needs. So that's, I think, part of the action item. Now, a couple of other things here. We have reached out and reached out and reached out. We thank you for answering the call. And all of us know, man, I go to so many meetings. I'm tired of going to meetings. I'm tired of talking. Yet we know if we don't talk, we often talk in ignorance. And if we don't meet, that's just my opinion or my perspective. It's not our perspective. We have tried to structure these meetings where they make sense, and we're only convening them when they actually need to be done. But the degree that we meet and plan effectively impacts the kind of outcomes we're going to have. I don't know what that means, but I needed to say that too.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I think what you just asked is something that I think we can take a lesson from some of the young people, because I've sat in meetings with them, and that is, when we ask that question, we need to ask the follow-up questions, because it's not an answer. It's what are all the questions that are going to help us do what we say we need to do. And that means that I think each of us on this panel needs to be clear about responding to what we think are some of the additional questions and things that we're going to have to address. And then we've got to group them under the things that are most important, because we're all over the place today. And that's okay, because we needed to start there. But now we're going to have, and I'm not talking about committees, because I hate committees and I hate meetings. You know, too many meetings, we don't get anything accomplished. But planning sessions where we are answering the questions and then offering the solutions, bringing them back electronically. We don't have to come back and meet and argue or anything else. Electronically, they know how to do it. We need to hire them, actually, figure out a way to make the funding for it, because they know how to do it, and they are doing it.
BK, may I say that just what you suggested, and people, excuse me for being chauvinistic about the MBK experiment, but the electronic exchange, a portal where we can begin to communicate and talk about some of these areas that are plaguing the black community, is already there for us. www.mbkhouston.org. Now, what I'd like to contribute is this, PK. There are some things that are so elementary, they don't need any real theoretical stuff. So here's what I'm trying to say to you, is that if you look at the kids that are having problems in HISD and major school systems, the kids that are identified, you know what are the first things that you're going to find? Major family dysfunction, which is the same. Is that the kids who are low performers, non-achievers, when you look into most of them, you're going to find out that there's not an active father, there's not an active male influence with them. And so the first thing that I'm trying to say to our community is that we've got to get the message out there, is that fathers should never abandon their kids. You got to get the message out there, is that you might not want to marry mom, but you got to stay involved with the kids. So in other words, we're trying to ask somebody to help us do for us what we should be doing for yourself. So if the DNA said that you're the father, you've always got to be involved with those kids. So I'm just saying, That's some self-correction. That's some things that we've got to do internally before anybody can really come about and help us do the things that we need to do.
Brothers,
let me ask McCoy, Patrick, if you will make arrangements to be able to take an offering up, because we need to pay this back, so we can do that. Hold on, sister. We're going to go to the audience one more time before we leave. Trust me on that. Gait was next. Do you have
I have a quick observation based on the recurring theme about self-responsibility. And to the extent that I am old enough to remember in high school and school where there were bad children, there were bad actors, we called them thugs. And each one of them had their parents at home. They had a father and a mother. So I don't believe we can use that as an excuse why we cannot demand nor partnership with those who have bad houses. I think that component of what we're talking about discussing is character building is what you're talking about. And in that service we give to the community, part of that message from us men will have to be, I've never had a man, frankly, my personal experience in life, I won't let a man be my friend, Anglo, Hispanic, or African American, that I know he's not taking care of some children that he's fathered. It's just never been in my life. That's a standard I personally have.
Wait a minute. Here's the problem. There is a confusion about moral and integrity within our community. Because you're right. I've seen it in the movement. One of the sisters in the Houston Justice Coalition, we were talking about the movement. She said, you know, the male leadership are hitting on all the sisters. Not for the purposes of developing a mutually loving relationship, for the same kind of street level sexploitation that we know goes on. Well, that happened in the 60s. And we had to check. Somebody said, wait a minute now. Wait a minute. We can't treat our gender partners in this way. We know the dangers of single charismatic leadership. The people get caught up, they get caught up with their voice, and the movement disintegrates. There are some things that are fundamentally clear that we know about organizing and human relationships and values and principles that we need to review for ourselves. Amen. And let me just end with this and go to Guy. The victory belongs to the people. And anybody who suggests, because they're so wise, or they're so intelligent, or they came to this movement in time, victory was won. Nelson Mandela told us that, and we're not anywhere near close to the statue of Mandela. It is the people's victory always, because without the people, we are nothing.
Earlier, it was mentioned about money. The University of Houston School of Planning and Architecture did a study for Sunnyside and says $22 million leaves Sunnyside every year, annually. Didn't say South Park, South Union, just Sunnyside. Now, the reason the money leaves is because the services are not contained within the Sunnyside boundary. The services are not there because they have been designed to be outside, so the money will travel outside. Now, let me share this one point about what I mean when I say either. It's not and and or. It's either. It's and and both and and. That's right. The City of Houston Solid Waste Department has a program, has a program that if you have a medical ailment, that you have a problem taking your trash out, your weekly trash or heavy trash, they have a service that you fill out an application so your doctor can sign it, and they will come pick up your trash from the backyard, put it in the front yard, pick it up, and take it back. Now, my mother is 93 years old. 4. How many other mothers from 60 on up need that service? But we don't even know that service exists and has existed for a while. So that is something that we need to learn, and we can do that for ourselves. But remember now, when you say doing it for yourself, you paid the taxes for the service. So why wouldn't you use something you paid for?
That makes sense.
That's my point about sharing the and both.
Yeah, and Charles,